I think we are very close to 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Good evening, everyone, and
Evening.
welcome. My name is Dorothy Killian, better known as Dot. I am serving as the interim associate pastor at Caldwell Presbyterian Church, Charlotte. For those of you who may not be from Charlotte, I want to welcome you this evening to this webinar featuring Kevin Adler, the co-author of As We Walk or When We Walk By, and you'll hear lots more about that in just a moment. At Caldwell, we have formed a team. You may have heard, hopefully, of Easter's Home, and John will tell you a little bit more about that. John Cleghorn is our pastor at Caldwell. You'll meet him in just a moment for those of you who do not know him. But we have formed a task force, if you will, called Our Neighbors Ourselves, and that is the education arm of Easter's Home. And that is the group that's sponsoring this webinar this evening. I see a couple of folk from the task force. Elena, I see Joe Hamby online. There may be others joining us who are members of that task force. I think Jenny Mitchell, yeah, I see Jenny on. They're members of the task force. But what we'd like to do is to get us started is to open with prayer. And then I will turn it over to John, who will give a little bit of information about Easter's Home, where we are, and then we'll introduce our facilitator for the evening, Kevin Adler. So I invite you now to join me in prayer. This prayer is from the book Black Liturgies by co-author Riley. Let us pray. Gracious and holy God, we kneel before you, thanking you for showing us what it means to give, not out of a desire for recognition or gain, but out of deep humanity. Grant us compassion for all who suffer, that our vocations would affirm the dignity of the systemically excluded and oppressed. Keep us from shallow callings that are only concerned with self and how we might advance in this world. Keep us from discernment that only draws us into our own interior worlds. May we learn to care for ourselves as well as others, particularly those of our siblings who are unhoused. We offer this prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Dot. Dot, thank you. And thank you for arranging this and helping lead the Our Neighbors Ourselves team. Good evening. My name is John Cleghorn. I'm going to continue to admit folks and as we go. Let me start with some context for tonight, and then we'll turn it over to Kevin. Logistically, we're going to go for about 75 minutes tonight, depending on the energy and the desire of the group. Rumor is that there's a football game, but Mark Logan has already declared that the Bills are going to win. So we'll be able to see that second half to see how that is achieved. But we are delighted you are here. It looks like there's tension in the ranks over this already. We're glad you're here. It's wonderful to click on these names. So many people that have taken such deep interest in this, and so many leaders who have played instrumental roles in getting us thus far. In church this morning, we heard the passage in Luke in which Jesus walks into the temple and opens the book to the prophecy of Isaiah, who declared that this is the year of our Lord's favor. And this is a year that Caldwell has been working toward for 10 years, and that is the opening of Easter's Home. A word about what Easter's Home is, if you're new to it, or just as a review. We are transforming a 14,000 square foot building, a former Christian education building, into 21 studio apartments for folks who have been chronically homeless. This is part of the response to Charlotte's need for at least 35,000 units of new affordable housing. That sounds like such a large number, and we talked about our 21 units as the widows might. But I read a report, the very recent report out this month, that is the current state of housing and homelessness in Charlotte. And I thought this was an interesting way to think about it. As we've talked about the spectrum of need across housing, homelessness, and affordable housing, really breaks down to subsets of populations. And our property will be designed specifically for people who have been chronically homeless. That is, they will have spent at least a continuous year on the streets, or within the last 3 or 4 years, enough time to add up to a year. So uh, if you think about that number, the current number for 2024 of folks in that category was 620, either 8 or 21 people who are meet that definition of chronically homeless. So if you look at our 21 units against that number, because it is a category that very few people are addressing, all of a sudden the impact of Easter's Home is that we'll house 3% of that need group. And so that begins to eat away at, at the problem and affirms that what we're trying to do with Easter's Home is very much needed. An update on the construction. Uh, as of Friday, our general contractor said they're still aiming for April 19 to finish construction. Uh, Everything is going well. We are on or under budget. That is to say, we are not over budget, and we're through the hardest parts of the project in terms of construction surprises. We have a couple of unpaid for categories of items. We need to repair and protect the stained glass that's at the front of the building. Uh, we are raising money right now to furnish the rooms with a combination of institutional furnishings that will be sturdy and reliable, and personal items. So we're not through fundraising, but we are appreciative that the building uh, has a $6 million cost that is already completely covered. And so we'll build a building that is debt free. And that will allow us to offer the very low rental rates for folks at the lowest income rates of 30 to 50% of the area median income. So that's where the project stands. There's a great deal about all of this at caldwellpresby.org/Easters. Uh, as part of that, we have been doing a lot of training and getting ready to understand the lives of those 21 folks who will share our campus with us. And that's what tonight is about. I want to give you a date to go ahead and mark down of our next uh, instructional offering, March the 30th, a Sunday, probably immediately after church, if not also a little bit of church. We're going to be talking about the subject of trauma informed care. Uh, Something like 78% of the unhoused population has suffered multiple traumas in their lives. And so we're going to look at what that means and how it shapes uh, their experience, and how knowledge of that with the right training can equip us to be good neighbors. And so mark your calendar, March 30 after worship. We probably will be talking more about that throughout March and throughout Lent. Is a big topic. Then in April and May, we will lean into more concrete, applicable training like role playing. What do we do when? Or what happens if? How do I respond if? And so um, we're not through learning, and we won't be through learning for quite some time. If I could remind everybody to maybe silence their pads and phones, that would avoid us from having to have some feedback. Let's move on to why we're here tonight. I attended a conference in which several of us went from Roof Above and Easter's Home, and talked about this movement of churches building housing last fall, and ran into a gentleman named Donald Burns, who told me very excitedly about a book he had co-written with a gentleman named Kevin Adler, and that is who we have with us tonight. Kevin Adler. He's an award-winning social entrepreneur, a nonprofit leader, and author. Since 2014, he served as the founder and CEO of Miracle Messages, and that's something we'll hear about tonight. He's done pioneering work on homelessness and relational poverty, and has been featured in major national media like the Washington Post and the New York Times. He's authored at least one other book. He's a TED resident, presidential leadership scholar. He has a master's in philosophy and sociology from the University of Cambridge and a BA in politics from Occidental College. He lives in the Bay Area where they know something or two about how to work with the unhoused. And I'm delighted to turn it over to you, Kevin, and make you the host as soon as I can figure out where I can find your name to do that. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Look at all these wonderful faces. And I can't believe you're watching me. Maybe you have two screens on. You got football on one and me on the other. Patricia's shaking her head. She's like, no, my team already lost. I have nothing to watch for. It's great to be with you all. Just as we begin, I was wondering if maybe a couple volunteers could just unmute themselves and share, why are you here? Sunday night, things going on, it's, weekend, football. How's God working in your life that prompted you to be here with us tonight? If you folks feel compelled to unmute and share, feel free to do so.
Well, I'll start us off. I, I am a huge fan of this book. And when we walk by, and it's earmarked and got all kinds of passages that I want. And I'm director of community education at Roof Above. And so I hope I'm responsible for a large number of copies that are sold in the Charlotte area. If so, I think I'm probably one of the biggest salespersons for the book, but just continually return to it again and again, even for my own enrichment. And so again, just really appreciate, just really, really appreciate. I share with people the opening line of the book. Everyone is somebody, someone, and just the powerful story behind the book is so meaningful as well. So anyway, Kevin, thank you so much. I'm just no, I do not want to be missing this ball game right now. I was going, how could we possibly not have foreseen this? But I wouldn't pass up this opportunity for anything. So thank you for being here with us.
We'll get you out of here before halftime or by before the
There you
third
go.
quarter. Thanks, Joe. And please, I'd love to connect further and see how we can partner with the work you're doing. I saw Patricia as well as Rob and Regina unmute themselves. So maybe Patricia and then
Right.
Rob and Regina.
I've just had the sense since we started talking about
They don't have a
this
Paul, I'll take a quiche.
All
I would
right,
love
hold on. We got Ann Hunter
No,
off mute. We hear every word you're saying, Ann.
sorry.
That's okay. Life happens. Okay, Patricia, please keep going.
I've just had the sense from the beginning that I would love to carry on conversations with these people to really get to know them and know what their lives have been like and to, kind of validate who they are. I mean, I'm a spiritual director, so it's not that I do spiritual direction with them, but that it's important for me to know them. And so that's my interest.
It's beautiful, Patricia. Thank you. It's important for me to know them. I think that applies to all of us. It's beautiful. Well, Rob and Regina, maybe you can close us out. And then I'm going to hand it to Mark too, because Mark, wearing that sweater and then being here, you have the floor for a minute after Rob and Regina. So
Just real quickly, I was going to say, because John told us to in church today.
hey, he's a man of influence.
We
Yeah.
have to get
No,
prepared
really,
for our
we
guests.
just want to be as prepared as possible to make this be successful and thrive.
Beautiful. I love that.
So for me, I think I'm here because certainly our congregation has done a bold and robust, we've taken up the call to love our neighbor. And the specific way, one of the specific ways is to um, specifically reach out to our unhoused neighbors. And so we do it clear-eyed in a way. But that also means that we need to understand the best practices. And I trust a lot of our leadership, John and Dot, who have led our neighbors ourselves. And if they, I mean, Joe Hamby, I mean, if they're citing you, Kevin Adler, and then we want to hear it. We've heard from tons of great people about best practices, and I've learned so much. And I I know that I will learn from our unhoused neighbors because it's a specific subset of the diversity of people that will really strengthen God's kingdom because they all have the same divinity that all of us have on this screen. And go Bills.
I mean, we know you're saying that on every fiber of your body, but it was appropriate to come out of your mouth too. That's beautiful, Mark. Thank you for sharing that. Can we all just take a quick screenshot? So I'm going to take a screenshot, ham it up for the camera if you want. You can wave, smile, whatever you do. We're going to do it. And oh, Lori's getting on. She's like, I got to be seen here. Oh, Lisa. Okay. Everyone make your appearance if you're coming in. Here we go. We got 3, 2. Well, waiting for D. There we go. Oh, we got Dick. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. One more. Okay, 3, 2, 1. There we go. All righty. Beautiful, y'all.
You muted yourself, Kevin. Kevin, you're muted.
I muted myself. This is pretty common. Y'all have beautiful faces. This was nice. I'll share that screenshot with you afterwards. I'm going to begin by sharing a few slides that try to articulate my story, how I got to be in a position leading a nonprofit in the homelessness space, doing the work that I do, writing a book about homelessness, and just walk you through that journey in case it's helpful. I also want to just share a bit about the work we're doing at Miracle Messages around homelessness. Bless you. And then I'm also going to really open it up to a conversation with all of you. So please jot down your thoughts, ideas, questions. And this is kind of a judgment-free zone. So anything on your heart, on your mind, we can talk about. I don't want to feel if it's on your mind and heart, it should be expressed because that's the only way we can learn and grow as people. Okay. And yeah, thank you all for muting yourself if you're coughing and wheezing, but I am going to ask you questions throughout. So just get ready with the mute button on and off, and we can have some fun together tonight. Okay, here we go. So let me share my screen, and can someone just maybe tell me if they can see this okay? It should be full screen now. Yep, John's giving me a thumbs up. So my name's Kevin Adler, Kevin F. Adler. And I'm the author of When We Walk By and currently serving as founder and residence of Miracle Messages, organization I started about 10 years ago. So to begin with, we're actually going to make this first part interactive. I'd like you to take yourself off mute and let me know what you see in this photo. What's going on in this photo? And if you've read the book, you might know what I'm referring to, so maybe hold back for a minute. But what's happening in this photo?
People living on the street.
Okay.
And they're being ignored.
Being ignored. Yep. Okay. What else? Just fix this here.
Looks like downtown.
Oh, downtown. Yep. And just fix this to this. Start sharing it again. Okay. Any final comment here?
Getting cold.
Getting cold. So what's interesting here about this photo, so this is actually from an experiment. It's a somewhat staged photo. 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, the New York City Rescue Mission, they did an experiment where they had individuals dress up to look homeless as unsuspecting members of their very own families walked by.
Wow.
In each instance of this experiment, not a single person recognized their own brother or sister, son or daughter, husband or wife, or in this lady's case, that's her mom and that's her dad. And so I think the question that we have to sit with for a moment is, would you recognize your loved ones if you walk by them on the streets? And the answer is, for all of us, and myself included, probably not. Neuroscience, I'm going to geek out with you for a minute. I'm kind of a nerd. The neuroscientists at Princeton and Duke, in your neck of the woods, North Carolina, they found that the medial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that activates when we see a person compared to, say, an inanimate object, this part of the brain is found not to activate when we see someone that we perceive to be experiencing homelessness. So in other words, we'll look at like a human being and, you have the part of the brain activate. You see an unhoused person, the regions that activate when you see an unhoused person at baseline, it's the right amygdala and the left insula. These are the regions of the brain associated with disgust, like nausea, vomit. If you saw someone threw up on the floor, that kind of feeling, that's what's going on at a neurological level, just at a baseline when we see a neighbor experiencing homelessness without the proper kind of training, relationship building, things of that sort. So there's work to do. There's work to do, to put it mildly. My journey in getting to know my neighbors experiencing homelessness really begins with this photo. That's me at the bottom left. That's my grandparents, my mom, my brother, and in the middle there, that's my Uncle Mark. Now, Mark was favorite member of my extended family. He remembered every single birthday, always sent a card. We'd always get together at Thanksgiving, at Christmas dinner, have long conversations on our shared love of super burritos. I don't know how the Mexican food is in your neck of the woods, but out here it's pretty good. And we just, I loved my Uncle Mark. He was just a very beloved member of my family. He also suffered from schizophrenia. And for 30 years, my Uncle Mark lived on and off the streets of Santa Cruz, California. And then while I was in college, I got a phone call one day from my dad, and he was crying. And he called and he said that his younger brother, my beloved uncle, had been found deceased. He was 50 years old at the time. And so this got me thinking. This was my dad and I visiting his gravesite. I just started thinking about the kind of life that my uncle lived when he wasn't at the Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner table. When we dropped him off at the Greyhound station, or my dad would bring him back to Santa Cruz, maybe he'd been a transitional housing unit for a while, but sometimes he'd just disappear for months at a time. And I started wondering, what was his life like when he wasn't sitting at the table with us? And did people who saw him as they walked by, did they realize that that is some kid's beloved uncle, or some person's beloved brother, or some person's beloved son? And I started thinking about my own walks and my own journey. This is a photo in San Francisco, right by City Hall. And I'll be honest with you, when I'd see people in situations like this, I didn't see them as people to be loved. I saw them as problems to be solved. And if you take nothing else from this conversation tonight, there is a change that we have to have on our hearts and our minds to see our neighbors experiencing homelessness not as problems to solve, but people to love. And when we love people, problems actually start getting solved. And that's what I've learned. So I went to church a couple weeks after that event, and the pastor had this question on for the congregation. He said, "Who is Jesus?" And you had to answer it with some kind of art form. Okay. And my response was I got this question in my heart: how would Jesus use a smartphone? Everyone else is, I'm going to paint a picture for Jesus. I'm going to sing a song. I'm not a good singer. You don't want to hear me sing. I'm not much of a, artist. You don't want to hear me, watch me paint. But I love using technology. I have a sociology background. So I just got this question: how would Jesus use a smartphone? So my response to that, and this is truly God's work more than anything I did. I was just the vestibule for this. I felt compelled to start inviting my neighbors experiencing homelessness to wear GoPro cameras around their chests and narrate their experience of what life is like on the streets. And the basic premise was pretty simple. I said, hey, I just walked by you. You're still here. What's it like to be you? And I think if it plays okay, we're going to have a short video clip from that project called Homeless GoPro. That was the starting point for my work in this space.
My name's Adam Reichert. I'm living in San Francisco. I've been homeless on and off for like almost 6 years now. For most people that are homeless, I hear it from friends and I see it, don't have any type of real interaction that means anything to them when you're homeless, because people treat you so much different.
About 90% of these people would care less about standing in front of them or not, I mean, most of them would not want to see me would rather not see me at all out here. And when I say that, I don't mean see me out here being homeless. They would just rather not see me out here at all. And it's, I guess, the way that our society's turned, where they look at me like I'm below them or something like that, and they don't realize it. Like I said earlier, that, a lot of people that I know right here in this neighborhood, in Castro, are living paycheck to paycheck, wondering if they're gonna be housed next week. How you doing, folks? Tomorrow's my birthday. I'm trying to get a hotel. I'll go and get a paper. See what I mean?
So I watched, hours and hours of pretty heartbreaking footage. And in one of the clips, I heard something that changed my life. And it was this quote: I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. When we think about poverty, we think of a lack of financial resources. Big facet of poverty, right? You need money and savings and, house and car and, some few basic things, material things, money. But there's this other type of poverty I've come to call relational poverty, of an absence of social support, feeling extremely isolated and lonely and not having anyone you can reach out to or call, provide social support for you. A sociological term for this is social capital. And as I started this journey, I realized that relational poverty is a form of poverty. And we'll talk more about that later on. But I want to share that for as many as 1 in 3 people experiencing homelessness, some form of relational breakdown is the cause that they attribute to the homelessness. Could be death of a family member, loss of a loved one, an argument, a falling out, a divorce, a suicide in the family, a separation. And this makes sense because, gosh, if push came to shove, maybe you lose a job, you have a health issue, some kind of catastrophic injury. Well, you're probably relying on your closest social support network to get by. What if that network is not able to hold you, or ones if there isn't much of a network? And that's where as many as 1 in 3 people say, well, the cause of my homelessness is some kind of relational brokenness. So hearing all this, thinking about this, kind of, processing this in my mind, I said, well, maybe I can just walk down Market Street, downtown San Francisco, go up to everyone I see who's visibly homeless and ask a very simple question. Do you have any family or friends you'd like to reconnect to? I didn't know anything about the issue of homelessness at this point. I just wanted to have conversations. And it struck me that maybe this is something that could be valuable. And so that's how I met Jeffrey. who's pictured in this photo here. It was December 2014, downtown San Francisco. And I walked by him at first, and I gotta be honest, I just walked by. Like the title of my book, When We Walk By, I walk by. I walk by all the time. It's not if we walk by, it's when we walk by. But something compelled me to come back and talk to him and spend a few minutes. And I walked back, and I'm sure glad I did, because Jeffrey said that he hadn't seen his family in 22 years. So I said, Jeffrey, would you like to record a video to your family? And he said, yes, he wanted to record a video to his niece, his nephew, his sister, his dad. This is the video that Jeffrey recorded to his family.
It's Jeffrey Michael Gottschall. I was born August 7th, 1969 in a small town in Pennsylvania named Georgeville.
Are there any friends that you would like to send a holiday message?
In Pennsylvania,
In
Georgeville,
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, if you can.
What are their names?
My dad, Harold.
What would you like to say to your dad?
I intend to go home and see you again someday.
So I get this video, it's on my phone, go home that night, and I'll be honest with you, folks, for the next few days, I didn't do anything with that video. And partly I didn't know if Jeffrey was telling me the truth. I didn't know what the backstory was. I didn't want to, get involved in something that could cause some issues. It just felt like a lot. But after a week, I said, I got to do something with this video. This person trusted me. I need to do something on behalf of him and his family. So I go on Facebook, find a Facebook group connected to his hometown. I post the video there with a short message. What happens next was a miracle, because within 1 hour, the video was shared hundreds of times. This is a screenshot from one of the Facebook groups it was posted in. Friends, classmates, neighbors started commenting, hey, I went to high school with Jeffrey. I work in construction. Does he need a job? I work at the congressman's office. Does he need health care? In the first 20 minutes of the post, his sister got tagged. Someone in the days that followed shared a yearbook photo of him from high school. That's his yearbook photo. And I got on the phone with his sister, Jennifer, the next day. She told me that Jeffrey had been a missing person for 12 years. And here's the video she had for her brother.
Get you home and the help that you need once you're here. My holiday message to you is this: if you don't give up, I won't either.
Within a few days, they were reconnected on a phone call for the first time in 22 years. And then a few months later, Jennifer was able to travel across the country by train. She's afraid of flying. And she was able to reunite with her brother. And this is after, over a decade of him being a missing person. And at that point, they reconnect, and I decided to quit my job and start doing this work full time, because I realized that Jeffrey isn't the only one, and this shouldn't be happening. In some sense, homelessness is one of the most visible scourges in our cities and our communities. You sometimes feel like you can't walk in some cities and communities and blocks without seeing people living and dying on the streets. But in another sense, our neighbors experiencing homelessness are incredibly invisible. Out of mind, out of sight. We don't know who they are. We don't know the story. And so I thought there's a way to change that. And as our mission says, as I think was quoted from my book, we say everyone is someone's somebody, and no one should be defined by what they lack. Let me just make sure here we don't have any issues. Yep, we're good. All right, let me hit play. So I want to share a little bit about miracle messages. I'm going to share a little bit about my book, and then we're going to have a conversation. So today at Miracle Messages, it's not just me walking down the streets anymore, taking videos of people, blasting it on social media and hoping for the best. We have a nationwide network of volunteers in their communities, staff members, caseworkers, social workers, outreach workers who refer people experiencing homelessness to Miracle Messages who may want to get involved in our services. This is Gabby Cordell. She's in South Florida. She was doing outreach, offering our services. And then when a message can come in, it can come in a variety of ways. So, videos can still happen, but we also have an online form, paper form on our website that can be downloaded. And then check out that phone number right there, 1-800-MISS-YOU, 1-800-MISSYOU. That's our toll-free hotline number. So if a person wants to reconnect to a loved one or a caseworker, social worker, volunteer on their behalf, they call 1-800-MISS-YOU. We can help take care of that and start the process. And what we do is we have now a network of volunteer digital detectives all across the country, make phone calls, write letters, do digital searches to locate loved ones, deliver messages, help people reunite with their families. And that effort through our reunification services, that has led to over 1,000 people experiencing homelessness reconnecting to their loved ones. And we see tremendous outcomes in many of those cases, from some people getting off the streets and living with their family or getting some financial support, to just feeling that they're not isolated, alone, increased mental health, physical health outcomes. But we also have realized that, and one other thing is we realized that pretty early on, families are often looking for their unhoused relatives that may be missing persons themselves, kind of like Jeffrey. So we started a service called Find Them, where it's basically the reverse search. We start with families that reach out to us. They tell us about a relative who may be experiencing homelessness, and then we try to find that individual. We've done over 130 of these needle in a haystack reunions. But for some people, family may be part of the problem, not part of the solution. Bridges have been burned. It's an unsafe home environment. They were kicked out. There was trauma. We talked about the trauma-informed care session coming up. That sounds like a good one. It sounds like the stats are, a large percent, most people experiencing homelessness have some kind of trauma. The experience of homelessness itself is traumatic, right? So everyone has had some kind of trauma, but some folks experiencing homelessness, they're coming from really difficult home environment situations, or in many cases, the family doesn't have the resources to help. So if relational poverty is poverty, what do you do if family isn't on the table as an option? That's where we launched the Miracle Friends Phone Buddy program. So what we do is we match volunteers all around the country with individuals experiencing homelessness for weekly phone calls and text messages, kind of like a digital pen pal. And those efforts have matched hundreds of people around the country. They've logged over 250,000 conversation minutes where folks express feeling less lonely, better able to navigate complex systems, having better health outcomes. And I can tell you, I have a friend in this program as well. His name's Andres. We text, we talk, and he has become a dear friend of mine. He attended my wedding last year and is someone I care about very, very deeply. And from that Phone Buddy program, and really, and this is a message I'd like to share for all of you with Easter's Home, one of the beautiful things about this work is by getting to know our unhoused neighbors and being in relationship, you start hearing interesting tidbits, anecdotes, issues that, hey, you're a thoughtful person. That sounds like a barrier that you're facing to getting off the streets. That sounds like one of the reasons why you're still experiencing homelessness. And one of those barriers that just kept coming up over and over again is, gosh, a lot of people experiencing homelessness just don't have any money. And it's extremely expensive to afford an apartment, even, entry-level apartment. So how can we help people who are in a Phone Buddy program have the financial resources to start getting back on their feet? And we started hearing from volunteers saying, hey, you've asked me to be friends with this person. I'm friends with them. It's very hard to watch my friend, not know what they're going to do to get dinner on the table tonight, or how they're going to get to work on Monday, because it turns out that about half of people experiencing homelessness have some form of a job, employment. And so what are you going to do for those folks? Because I don't want to turn a blind eye to my friend. I care about this person now. all that is to say, we ended up deciding in December 2020 actually, yeah, December 2020, to create what turned out to be one of the first basic income pilots for individuals experiencing homelessness in the country, where initially we raised $50,000, $500 a month for 6 months, no strings attached. And really didn't know what to expect from that program. This is Elizabeth. She was one of the first recipients of what we called Miracle Money. She and her friend Joan had really hit it off. Elizabeth, a little bit of her story. She had been a teacher in the Bay Area for 14 years. She has a degree in sociology, just like me, from UCLA. She was a published author. She had had recipes published in the Los Angeles Times. She had run a nonprofit. You know, this is a successful member of society, contributing to society. And then one fateful day, she got a diagnosis that she had cancer. And it's colon cancer. The outlook wasn't looking great. And she ended up not being able to continue her job because the chemotherapy was not safe for her to continue to show up to the students in a school setting. And so she lost her job, and then she had no income. She lost her apartment of 14 years. And for the first time in her adult life, in her 50s, she experienced homelessness. Fortunately, she was able to get a medical respite bed just before hitting the streets, but she lost her home. And she was nominated by her friend Joan for Miracle Money. So we gave her $500 a month for 6 months, no strings attached. Within 6 months, Elizabeth had been able to use the money to become eligible for a low-income affordable housing program for senior citizens that required some kind of minimum monthly contribution, not that dissimilar from Easter's Home. And she was able to move into an apartment just a few miles away from where she once lived in Redwood City, California. And she's now in what she calls her forever home. And I'll tell you, the first thing she did when she got that money from Miracle Money is she made a donation to Miracle Messages. And I said, hey, Elizabeth, you didn't need to do this. This wasn't necessary. There was no obligation for that. She said, well, I didn't do it for you. She said, I did it for myself so I could once again feel the dignity of being able to support the causes I believe in. And I'll share the initial results from our basic income pilot. This was our very small $50,000 non-scientific pilot, but we had 2/3 of people who we gave the money to secure housing within 6 months. They used the money better than we could have used it for them. So that led us, and I can share more. There's an annual report on our website you can download. Money was spent on food, rent, childcare, savings, and that led us to create what turned into now a $2.1 million randomized controlled trial in partnership with Google.org, USC, where we have been giving out $750 a month for 1 year to over 100 unhoused neighbors across the state of California. We'll have the results in the next couple months from that RCT. So that's the work we do at Miracle Messages, reunification services, phone buddy program, direct cash, and really as undergirding all of that is what we call narrative change. Changing the hearts and minds of everyday folks. We say no one, our mission statement is pretty simple. We say no one should go through homelessness alone, and no one should feel helpless on this issue. And that last part really speaks to us as housed people. And that's really why I wrote this book. When We Walk By, for me, is the culmination of all the stories, experiences, silly assumptions and biases and things that I uncovered on my 10-year journey in honor of my Uncle Mark, who really inspired me to get started on this journey. It's everything I wish I knew when I started on this walk around homelessness. So there's me with the book. Nice words from, Publishers Weekly and SF Chronicle and others about the book. So as we kind of start going to a close, and I really want to take a few minutes here to talk about the book and then open it up to conversations. So 2 questions, and I can't see you right now. I'm sharing my screen. You can share more when you unmute yourself later and ask any questions or make any comments. But just maybe you could answer this for yourself and just kind of think about it for a moment. So first question I want to ask you, how many of you care about the issue of homelessness? Every hand goes up, right? Assume every hand is up. Everyone, you're here for a reason, half watching the bills and, this is, you care about the issue. That's what's the trick question here, Kevin, right? Second question is just as important. How many of you know someone who is currently experiencing homelessness? So when I ask these two questions, I often start my talks at like colleges and universities and Rotary clubs with these two questions. First question, 100% of people, 98%. A couple of people are dozing off in the back or on their phones, right? Second question, it's never more than about 5% of people that can raise their hands. And I try to say, with all due respect, this is part of the issue. If we don't know who our neighbors are, if we don't know someone by name, as a friend, as a neighbor, how on earth can we ever really address this issue of homelessness, number one? So Brian Stevenson is really someone I look up to, who talks about this concept of proximity. And Brian Stevenson says, proximity is recognizing the power you have to make a difference in the lives of the people around you. And at the very least, wrapping your arms around them and affirming their humanity and their dignity. I believe Brian Stevenson's onto something there, and I love that concept. I actually think we have to go further. We have to be relational. We have to get to know our neighbors experiencing homelessness. We have to have at least one or two people in our lives who we can say, gosh, they're going on a very different moment than I am at this moment. But I guarantee you, the more you get to know a neighbor experiencing homelessness, the more you'll hear elements of your own story and feel like you can relate to it. Because really, it's one paycheck away, one catastrophic injury away, one unfortunate car accident away, one job loss away. That it could be any of us. So the work in this book, that the way it's structured, is there's three parts. First part is on our shared humanity and how humanity and breakdowns in our humanity result in the situation we're in with this crisis of homelessness. It begins with a chapter on relational poverty. We've talked a little bit about that. There's also a chapter on stigma and stereotypes and shame. When Ray, one of our first basic income recipients, told us his story, he said he was not willing to tell his family that he was experiencing homelessness because he was so ashamed that he felt like he had let them down. And so this element, and not only feeling from our neighbors experiencing homelessness with their family, it's imposed upon them on how we look at homelessness as the other, us versus them. And that gets into the chapter on exclusion, where half of the cities in the country have laws and ordinances that make it illegal to be homeless. Anti-camping, anti-sleeping, anti-loitering, anti-feeding. And then there's a real virulent thread of paternalism in the service sector and really in society at large. Here as a thought experiment, we have this notion in America of the self-made man, self-made woman, rugged individualism, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Hey, I'm all for the American dream, and I think that plays a role, right? That kind of entrepreneurial spirit. But if you're poor in America, let alone if you're experiencing homelessness, does that mean you are deservedly poor? Did you do something or didn't do something to merit your lot? And I would say no, absolutely not. It's really as much, there's hard work and determination, but there's also a lot of luck, chances, circumstances. Otherwise, how would you explain different outcomes in people who grew up in one environment versus another environment, and one, level of economic resources versus another, one, racial group versus another? So it's broken systems that we're talking about, not broken people. And I think there's a role that we have to recognize in how we can judge a person experiencing homelessness, that they might be deservedly poor. You did something to deserve this situation. Well, I'll tell you that's not true for the vast majority of folks. And then this kind of rugged individualism mindset. So, maybe take away from this first section of the book, So relational poverty is both a cause of homelessness. There's 1 in 3 people attributing their cause of homelessness to relational poverty, but it's also a consequence of homelessness. You end up experiencing homelessness. It's a very isolating, otherizing experience. This photo here is the most heartbreaking cardboard sign. I took this photo, cardboard sign that I've seen in my 10 years doing this work. If you can read it, it says, "At least give me the finger." Can you imagine getting to a place, truly, where you'd rather have someone put a middle finger in your face than what you're getting right now, which is totally ignored, just having people walk by? So part 2 then, so we start with a humanity, and I'll share a quote here that I think really inspires me. Martin Luther King is described in a book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. She was talking about the tactics and the approach that Martin Luther King had towards the civil rights movement and racial reconciliation in this country. And this is the quote in describing Martin Luther King's strategies and approach. She said, he understood, and I'm paraphrasing here, so bear with me, said, he understood that it's flawed public consensus in addition to flawed public policies at the root of racial oppression. And for me, I think we talk a lot about flawed policies, right? And I'm talk about those in a minute, like housing. You don't have, a nationwide shortage of 8 million units to meet current demand, mental and behavioral health system, the criminal justice system, the revolving door between homelessness and incarceration. We're going to talk about that. But it's also flawed public consensus. To me, that means what's on our hearts and minds. What are the expectations that we have as people around, in MLK describing in terms of racial groups, I think that applies equally well today around homelessness. And what I've learned is that homelessness really is the issue of all roads lead to homelessness. All the broken systems, all the things that we could improve upon, you'll find people experiencing homelessness because of those broken systems. So I wanted to share a few stats that basically, if you're, you're at the dinner table and, uncle or aunt so-and-so says, the homeless, they're all bums and they just get a job, right? Here's your opportunity to say gently but firmly, well, actually, uncle or aunt so-and-so, did you know blank, blank, blank? So here's your couple talking points that I think are helpful in addition to whatever else you took away today. So for youth who age out of foster care, over 1 in 3 of those youth will experience homelessness by the time they're 26 years old. And for Black youth, this goes up to 60%. 60%, 3 out of 5 will experience homelessness by the time they're 26 years old just by aging out of foster care. 50% of unhoused adults first experienced homelessness as young people in their youth. For the chronically homeless, this percentage is even higher. The number one predictor of adult homelessness is youth homelessness. 45% of adults experiencing homelessness have at least one job. That's that stat I was sharing earlier. And another 40% can't work because of some kind of disability. This is all in the book. So, get a copy, take a look. This is all there with more stats and nuance, but I'm just giving you some of the high level ones. There's not a single county we have over 3,000 counties in this beautiful country. There's not a single county where someone who's working full time and earning the federal minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment at the so-called fair market rent. Less than 1% of counties where that same hardworking person can afford a 1-bedroom apartment at the fair market rent, working full time at the federal minimum wage. All right. So you hear a stat like that, and you almost say, well, homelessness in our country right now is an inevitability. You can almost think, it's both the jobs and, we don't have enough housing. It's not a result of failed individuals. Laney who is someone I feature in my book. Each chapter begins with a story. And in this case, this is a chapter on work, wages, and wealth. And Lainey and Gabe, incredible mother and son I've known for 10 years doing this work. They say all the time, people tell me, get a job. And I just cried. A couple of times I'd actually sit there and say, you know what? I actually do have a job. We're just down on our luck right now. And then they'd just walk away. And finally, part 3 is on solutions. So one thing, and just in closing here, I want to share, there's 100 pages of solutions in this book, from fixing broken systems, how to heal our humanity. We'll go through a couple of them tonight. But one thing I want to make sure all of you feel, this is not an issue I hope people feel guilty about. Look, there's a responsibility we have. I'm, sharing some of the hard stuff to hear, and from the neuroscience to the policies to the hearts and minds. There is enough shame and guilt and feeling like you're not doing enough in the world. We got enough of that. This is an issue that, of course, you don't know these things, or if you don't know anyone who's experiencing homelessness, right? It's okay. But the thing is not okay is to just say, well, I'm just going to leave it at that. We have to lean in. And so in closing, what I want to share is, there's this question that sometimes hovers over the conversation. Maybe it'll come up tonight. Happy to talk about it. It's, why are so many people experiencing homelessness? That's a really good question. We can talk about that. I've shared some stats with you tonight. Equally important question that never gets asked. 1 out of 2 Americans today in this country are one paycheck away from not being able to pay rent. 40% of people in the United States today say they don't know where they'd get $400 for an unexpected emergency. 40%, $400. So that actually leads us to a second question that never gets asked. I want to put forward with here tonight. Why aren't more people experiencing homelessness? Why is it only, 600, 700,000 people? Why isn't it millions, tens of millions of people every year? And the theory, the hypothesis I want to put forward is it's family, it's friends, it's community, it's church, faith-based groups, tackling relational poverty, people doubled up, tripled up, couch surfing, informal economy. It's relationships. It's social capital is making up this difference. So when I think about Jesus, our Lord and Savior, and then I think about and see a sign like this, not to pick on Scottsdale, Arizona, but here's one I found on the internet. Most people don't give money to panhandlers. It's okay to say no. Give instead to agencies that help those in need. I think of actually, Matthew 25, verse 35, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. The work y'all are going to be doing and have already embarked on at Easter's Home is incredibly moving. It's not a final step, but it's a really, really powerful step forward. And there's an opportunity to get to know people who not only you'll be a blessing in their lives, I guarantee they'll be a blessing in your lives as well. So with that, this idea, no one should go through homelessness alone. And just as important, and this is speaking to us as housed people, none of us should feel helpless on this issue. There's just way too much good work to be done. So with that said, there's a couple links if you want to learn more about the nonprofit that I now serve as founder in residence at. We hired my successor, so I'm no longer the head honcho. It's called miraclemessages.org. You go to our website, you sign up to get involved. Feel free to make a donation if you'd like. And then we're on social media, and feel free to follow me on social media or connect Instagram, any of them. I'm there. And I just want to thank you all for your time. So thank you all, and let's have a conversation.
Well, Kevin, thank you. The sweep of just those few minutes gives you all a very good sense of this book. And I encourage you to order it. It is both an appeal to our faith and our moral ethical side, but also a wonderful in-depth overview of how we created this problem nationwide and in Charlotte and how we get out of it. I'm going to do my best to moderate a Q&A. I think the best thing I can do is ask you if you are able to use the digital hand raise, or if not, just raise your physical hand. But before you do that, I want to get the questions rolling with one question, Kevin, if I may. And you touched on so many things that I had marked in my copy of the book. As we think about Easter's Home, and you've studied the Easter's Home page, and you've gotten a sense of what we're trying to do, I thought it was so powerful that I think we do need to all learn how to become advocates for the unhoused, not just the people that we're going to house, so to speak, but from whence they have come. And thank you for the primer, and there's so much good stuff in the book about stigma that I would recommend we read and understand, because that's where so many people, even well-intended people, start just with the wrong idea of who's on the streets and why. But back to your specific issue of relational poverty, I wonder if you could help us stretch that concept, because it specifically deals with people who are on the streets today. We're going to have 21, and not to limit our advocacy to Easter's Home, but since that's our immediate focus, we'll have 21 people who obviously will not be on the streets. They'll be living in one of our apartments, but because they will have been chronically homeless categorically, they're going to fit a lot of the challenges that you have described. Again, the definition of having been chronically homeless is that they would have spent at least a year, continuous year, unhoused, unsheltered, or within the last 3 to 4 years, enough to add up to a year. So they're only a hop, skip, and a jump away from being actively on the streets tonight. How I want to come around to my question, but quote your book. Our model, of course, is housing first. You write on page 23, housing first is not housing only. Indeed, one of the 5 core principles of housing first strategy is social and community integration. You go on to point out that prolonged isolation is estimated to decrease a person's lifespan by 15 years, equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Psychologist Julianne Holt-Lunstad confirmed that experiences of social isolation, loneliness, of living alone were associated with 26% to 32% increased likelihood of early mortality. So Easter's Home will first of all save lives, and then it will lengthen lives if we can get it right. And then one other thing that jumped out at me before I do get to my question was your point that there is this stigma that we all need to learn how to advocate against. What is your advice to us as we welcome our neighbors, not pounce on them the first night they're there, but as we get to know them over time? How would you take your experience with both Miracle Messages and with your broad understanding of relational poverty and speak to us as folks who will have in our immediate proximity folks who will have been homelessness? In other words, this is not an explicit application of walking up to a person and lending them our relational capital who's on the streets, but people that are only one step away and only one step away from receding if we, hopefully that's not going to happen. I don't know if I've made my question clear, but twist your thinking a little bit about how we work with people who are actively on the streets to what is your advice to us on how to embrace all of your knowledge with people who have come off of the streets sometime fairly recently to live in Easter's Home?
It's a great
How
question.
we can lend relational capital.
Yeah, it's a great question, Reverend. Thank you, John. A few thoughts on that. So I think it's important to recognize that if they're, as you kind of said, one step removed from homelessness, we're maybe 2 or 3 steps removed ourselves. Like all of us
right.
but for the grace of God go I. I'll share this. This is just, between us as friends. We have a board member who contributed, who got our Miracle Money project going in California. They personally contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to our efforts. Very well off couple. And a few weeks ago, they found themselves in a line for a clothing drive to get new clothes because their house burned down in the fires that happened in LA a few weeks ago. And they messaged me and said, could never have imagined experiencing homelessness. Now they're some of the fortunate ones because they have a lot of family and friend support. They have a lot of financial resources to fall back on. But there are people who, both in the fires recently in California and the horrible flooding that happened in your beautiful state and in Asheville area, who 5 years from now will be a year from now are going to become chronically homeless. Will always be destabilized for years until they die. So the people that you'll be meeting are perhaps strangers from a familiar land that, God willing, none of us get too acquainted with other than through that relationship. I'd also say, let's face it, these are people. People can be broken and messy. It's going to sometimes feel like 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. There's going to be frustration. There's going to be moments of heartache and things happening that you're like, why did we even embark on this? What a bad idea. Can you believe this just happened? It could create some division within the community. And I think division, I'm hoping and praying that does not occur. Dialogue will be essential, right? We've got to talk about what happens openly. There is no silver bullet for ending homelessness, including housing. There is no silver bullet for homelessness. Certainly not relationships as a silver bullet. And in fact, you see, and I hope I'm not providing any premonition or foreshadowing, there is a large percentage of folks who get housed and then within months of getting housed, fall back into homelessness and lose their housing because there's just not a familiarity and of the routines of, how do you maintain that housing? Are you isolated? Is there a network? What's kind of getting to know each other? So I think, Reverend John, Dot, your team, the whole community, our neighbors, ourselves initiative. I think you've done as much as you can with prep. You're doing research, you're learning. What I'd say as maybe an invitation is how wonderful would it be if every single person who moves into one of Easter's homes finds their person within the congregation, right? Like, hey, there's some people on this line that are maybe like, oh, this Kevin Adler guy, he was great. I loved him. And then there's someone else who's like, what a loser. I didn't enjoy that at all. What a waste of my time. I'm watching the Bills. I'm watching, heaven forbid, the Chiefs. And that's okay, right? Not everyone, we don't all have to get along with every single person. We don't have to like each other as best friends. So my point is, I think taking some time to really get to know someone and see who you resonate with, right? Who do you relate to, connect to? But I think through relationships, through prayer, through humility, right? Here's a moment where, there is a call, there is both a need to declare this from the bandstands and celebrate and do a ribbon cutting and give talks at conferences. And there's also a tremendous value in saying, we're still figuring it out. And I found in this work, the best thing I did when I started this journey was I said, the only thing I know about homelessness is I know nothing. The whole Socrates mindset, everything I've learned has just been through relationships, conversations, and then inspiring me to do research on policies, on stats, on what's going on at a kind of trend level. So I hope that's helpful.
Super helpful. And again, the book does a fabulous job of that. Here's what I'm going to propose, that we go to about 8:00 and then check in and see how we're doing. We're fortunate to have Dr. Lori Thomas with us. She has been a wonderful navigator of this. Lori, I'm gonna, if it's okay, if you'll still be with us until late, I'm gonna let you have the last word in case you want to polish all of this wisdom off. The only way I know how to do this is I've got all of your shining faces and names up on my screen. If you have a question, use the digital hand or your physical hand. And I'm just going to toggle back and forth between the two groups of faces I've got to see who has the first question.
Just while that's getting going, I do see a couple in the chat, so I can kind of speak to those if that's okay, Reverend.
Yeah, and I don't have to moderate this Q&A. You can. I just don't know how to do it equitably.
No, that's great. We'll tag team it then. So I see a question from Mark on how do we recalibrate our brain? Does the brain recalibrate, transform after proximity and relationship with unhoused people? So I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't want to give kind of a medical or scientific response here. But what I can say is the best tools that I've discovered over the last 10 years in changing hearts and minds has really come down to like three things. So one is stories. Stories. How many here remembers what Jeffrey's story from the beginning of my talk? See head nods, hand waves. That story's going to stick with you for a while. It's stuck with me for 10 plus years, right? Elizabeth's story, right? Some of the other stuff is going to get murky over time, but I think you'll remember elements of that story. So stories, I heard it described at a technology group I was part of. I live in, Silicon Valley, so a lot of high tech. They said storytelling is the first form of human technology. Right? Like, I mean, it makes sense. Imagine we're gathered around in a cave or by the fire, and I need to explain that there is a tiger over there yonder. If you go there, you might get eaten. Or when you eat this type of food, you could get sick. Or, oh, hey, there's good food over there by that place. We need to tell stories to understand the world around us, right? So that is a form of technology. That's scale. So storytelling is one form. A second form, I would say, is service. There's reason why the words of a late great president, not Jimmy Carter is someone I love, but I'm quoting someone else, said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I think the reason why that call to action was so powerful is at some basic level, as people, we want to serve. We want to roll up our sleeves and get involved. We just often don't know where and how, and is it going to make an impact? So I think finding ways to be of service, get to know others who are being of service, showing up, and then practicing humility during that service is a great way to go. And then the third is relationship. And I'll share, this is a little bit of a different than homelessness, but I'll share it at a personal level. So I'm going to share one more slide here if I have it pulled up. I think I do. Okay, here we go. So I have the good fortune of over the last few years having a pandemic love story. All right, met my person during the pandemic, and we got married last year. Take a look, proof. Look at this beautiful photo. Come on, that's a great shot. Me and my wife Taja, and so Taja is African American and Native American. And early on in our relationship, we were walking down the street holding hands. And someone came up and yelled this racist comment at us. And I was shocked, right? I was shocked. And I didn't respond. And then it turns out that was the right thing. And we kept walking. And I kind of turned to Tasha, and this is, weeks of dating. And I said, gosh, I can't believe that happened. This is horrible. Like what? This is, that was so upsetting. That was so inappropriate. And she responds, well, something like that happens to me maybe once a month. And I said, oh, you and I might be having very different experiences of the same streets that we walk on there. And I worked up the courage to ask her a question that had been on my heart since we started dating. I said, one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to say or do the wrong thing. And you know what she said without missing a beat? She looked at me and she said, don't worry, you will. It's inevitable. Of course, I'm a straight white Christian man. Like, I haven't walked a mile in her shoes. I don't know. But what she said is, it's not whether you say or do the right thing and make mistakes, you will. But what matters is, do you then take the time to understand why that was an issue, to get to know, to do your own research, to ask me questions, to not talk down to me when I'm sharing my experiences? That's what matters. I think there's a parallel to this opportunity. You know, it's not worth over planning. Okay, what do I say? Do I say homeless person? Do I say person experiencing homelessness, unhoused neighbors? What's, I mean, we can have that conversation, but just starting to have conversations. And then when you say or do the wrong thing, which you will, because how would you know otherwise? You take the time to really listen, understand, not get super defensive, and have the humility that, Taja graciously extended to me in a different matter. So.
That is powerful. I was writing it down. I know we've got one other question in the chat from our mayor, but let me look digitally here and see if we have any hands raised. Joe, did you have your hand up, or should we go to Jennifer's question? Joe, you're muted if you're speaking.
No, I was just clapping for his celebration. So yeah, it did look like I'd raised my hand.
Great.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Okay. You were it was one of those praise waves, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Jennifer's question, and I'll warn you, Kevin, this is a little bit of a tricky, I won't say a trap, but
it's a great question. I love it.
I've
read it. Yeah.
The person who asked it is our former mayor and also former chair of our Board of County Commissions, but I'm glad it's a good question. I'm glad she asked it because it's a great question. What are some low-hanging policy changes that we might educate ourselves about to end this crisis?
Excellent question. Very important. I would first and foremost, there's 100 pages in the book and around solutions. A lot of them do relate to policies. So I know we've kind of gone light on the policies tonight, more the hearts and minds. Anything I share now, it's just going to be a drop in the bucket of what's in the book. But a few things that to share, I mean, a couple basic ones. Part of the reason we're in the crisis we're in is, in San Francisco, for instance, for every one person who gets off the streets, another 3 people fall into homelessness. All right. So that's a inflow issue. You got a fire hydrant that's open. You can kind of bail out, but the fire hydrant has to be turned off if we're going to really get on top of this. So I think a lot of the effective policies, I mean, there's certainly stuff that can be done around chronic homelessness and response to homelessness. We talk about that. A lot of it is going to be prevention because we are at the tip of the iceberg right now. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. And so to me, it's really thinking, if you spend a little bit of money now, a little bit of resources to keep people in their housing, to support families, to reinforce social structures, to do problem solving, or, things like child tax credit, rental assistance, making sure people don't lose their homes in eviction. What is it? Pennies saved, pennies spent is dollars saved, right? Is I think the mindset. In terms of a couple other ones that I'm a big fan of. So we sure as human beings like to get into like black and white categorization, yes or no, red or green, left or right, red or blue. That to me is, again, that's kind of a version of like seeing our in-house neighbors like not as people. So I get past the categorization. And when it comes to housing, even in the homelessness space, there's a lot of debate. Oh, okay, everything should be permanent supportive housing. Okay, everything should be emergency shelters. I have a little bit of a theater acting background. I've done a lot of plays, and my high school class favorite was most likely to win an Oscar. I'll leave it to y'all if you think that's a possibility still. But the mindset in improv, has anyone done improv before? What are the 2 words that you always have to know in improv to keep a scene going? Mark got it. Yes, and. Should we build more permanent supportive housing? Yes. And should we have a tiny home community? Yes. And should we have a safe parking site where people can sleep safely in their vehicles? That's a very low hanging fruit. And it acknowledges the situation we're in. Yes. And should we have shelters that are safe, that always can answer the question that I put forward on every housing question? Would you be comfortable having you or your loved ones live there? If you can't answer that in the affirmative, that's a bad housing option. But, maybe 150, square foot tiny home, a car is not long-term, but would I rather have that or on the streets? So thinking of the whole spectrum of housing, and then you can get into density, zoning, how easy is it to build housing, building housing near transit or working with transit agencies. So it's not like a little, desert. You have to be able to, get back to work, get food. Again, keep skimming the top, foster care, increasing the age of foster care, where people get aged out of foster care at least to 21, right? That would address some of the issue that we talked about. And then, raising incomes, direct cash, I think is part of it as well. So happy to talk more offline, but please take a look at the book, and I hope that's helpful just as an overview.
It is very helpful. All right, I'm going to do another quick click through of your bright, shiny faces to see if there are any raised digital or physical hands for questions.
And while we're doing that, just as a little bit of a plug, you may be thinking, oh, how can we work together? What can we do? So in addition to, reading the book, and I really appreciate those who have read it, as one ask, if you've read the book and you feel compelled to, being able to leave a quick review on Amazon or Goodreads, that actually makes a big difference. I didn't realize that as a kind of an early author, but appreciate it if you do that. Give an honest review. Also, we've received over 10,000 folks around the country wanting to get involved in this work. And we've been thinking for a long time, how do we get all these folks involved? What does that look like? So in 2025, in this year, we're going to be launching a nationwide system of local chapters where community members will come together and be able to visit partner sites to offer things like family and friend reunification services and a phone buddy program. And really, if no one's interested in family reunification or being in a phone buddy, just breaking bread, building relationships. So we're looking right now both for volunteers who want to help create chapters in their local community or be part of chapters. The ask would be maybe every week, every other week, going to a partner site. Could be at Easter's Home, could be other service providers, Roof Above, maybe we can talk about it. And then we're also looking for partner sites who are willing to open their doors to volunteers once a week, twice a week, something like that. So if you're interested in either the partnership side, where you are part of an organization or a group of neighbors experiencing homelessness, offering services, or something like Easter's Home, or you're on the volunteer side wanting to do weekly visits, offering the family reunification services, phone buddy, but again, building relationships first and foremost, please reach out to me. We're putting together a list of cities and communities that we're going to be expanding to. And I would love to include, your neck of the woods in Charlotte as part of that.
Cool. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what springs forth once we get our neighbors moved in and we learn so much more about opportunities like these. I'm scanning.
I see Rachel has a question.
Yeah, I think you just answered my question though, Kevin, which was, I was going to say, where does Miracle Messages work geographically? Is it limited to San Francisco? And it sounds like it has been, and that's about to change. So
We actually, yeah, thanks for the follow up on that. It's been available nationwide for a while, but we haven't really had a model that has allowed us to expand until this chapter model is starting to take root. So we right now have one chapter that's really active in Texas at the University of Texas, Austin. And so we have college students who've signed up for this chapter, and they go to local partner sites once a week, twice a week, offering our reunion services phone buddy program. They have helped people reunite with their family, get off the streets. They've brought in people for the phone buddy program. Mm-hmm. And, these are 18, 19, 20-year-old college students having their hearts and minds shaped by the relationships they're forming, and they form relationships with each other. So that's been a beautiful chapter for Miracle Messages. We're looking for other colleges and universities to expand that chapter model. And then we have staff right now in South Florida, upstate New York, in California, a few other places here and there. But our model is not to hire staff members in every community. That financially, that just doesn't make sense. So we work with local volunteers, local partners, local chapters to try to work on that. And we have hundreds of organizations that have referred people to us all around the country. So they go to our website and they submit a referral. So, whether you do a chapter or not, or a formal partnership, you're always available to refer people to our services. So if someone at Easter's Home says, hey, I'd like to reconnect to a loved one, I don't know how to do that. Or, hey, I'd like someone to talk to, maybe outside the congregation. I want to talk about the experience I'm having with this program. We're happy to sign them up for our phone buddy program or bring them into our reunification programs. And to do that, you just go to miraclemessages.org and fill out the referral form, or you can call 1-800-MISS-YOU.
Outstanding. Thanks for that eagle eye on that question. All righty.
Looks like Jeanette, is that a question?
Hi, Charles.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, and real fast, John. Do we as a congregation need some kind of session together to talk about boundaries? Do I give money? Do I give food? Do I give clothing, etc.? Boundaries are important in relationships, I think.
It's great. It's a great question, and one, knowing you, Charles, you knew the answer to before you asked it, and that is yes, we must have that training. And so absolutely we will. We have always targeted our final weeks before our neighbors move in for that kind of role playing and very practical application of how do we handle boundaries. How, literal role playing. If Joe comes up and asks for $5 every time you see him, what do you do? Or whatever the issue may be. Our friends at Roof Above are going to lead that training for us. And so watch for that on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday, but absolutely. And then for those who will volunteer at Easter's Home, there will be even more in-depth training around things like, I hope everybody will come to trauma-informed care, but other layers of preparation. If you work on the front desk, the concierge desk, as we're calling it, there'll be training for that as well, because that is more intimate interaction with our neighbors as they come and go. Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you.
Hold us to
it's
that.
my pleasure. Yeah, it's great. Great question. I'm pulling up a final thing in my book, so I'll have something to close with from the book, but that you made me think of.
Well, then why don't we move toward closure? Let's remind ourselves on First Fridays, we always have two Get Proximate opportunities. at West Friar, and Shelley and others very frequently go to one of the roof above facilities and serve dinner. And that's a wonderful chance. Many of us have done that. We get to interact with our neighbors and serve them and then sit with them if we'd like. And then a little more arm's length, but Randy Hood and Marie Mancinelli and team always are looking for folks to help prepare lunches and pack and deliver lunches from a creche place. That also is this Friday. So that's Friday afternoon in the third place to work with Randy. And then late Friday afternoon around 5 o'clock, meet Wes and Shelley to go to a shelter and serve dinner. Lori, before Kevin wraps us up, any final insights or encouragement or direction for us in these? We're literally in the home stretch.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thank you, Kevin. This is fantastic, and I'm struck by, I was going to say both and, but I love the yes and framing so much even better than both and I think one of the things that I have reflected on as I've done some of this work is how susceptible we are in this space, in this country, to quick fixes and silver bullets. And there's just no quick fix silver bullet out of this issue of homelessness. And I think when we try to do that, that's when we start to see people as problems to be fixed versus people to be loved. And I so appreciate that framing as a social worker and as someone who started early on in Housing First with Samson Barris years ago. It's very easy to make people problems to be solved. Every day it's easy to make people to be problems to be solved. When you pass someone on the street asking for money, someone at Easter's home asking for money, it'll be very easy to make them problems to be solved. And the higher calling, I think, is the relational calling and consistently keeping ourselves vulnerable to that. And I'll close with my thoughts with something I remember from Sam, and I know Sam has joined us before for conversations. And he was here, and I think it was 2016, 2015, 2016. And we were doing focus groups with people with lived expertise as a part of the effort to end chronic homelessness in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. And we had this, it was a horrific focus group, one of the most difficult ones I've probably ever done. And at that point, Sam is 20, 30 years in. And I just remember he had just to take time to, he was devastated. And I thought that the vulnerability that you have to leave yourself open to when you hear, when you're constantly confronted with very difficult stories. And it's stuck with me all this time. And it's a story that comes back to me that's a very relational space, being open to the pain and experience of others. And so I'm really grateful for the pairing of the hard statistics, the things, all those pieces from so many, I love the neuro, all the brain science. That's not a place that I have focused a lot on. I love all of that hard science. And then what we often consider the softness of relationships, which is often just the connective tissue. So thank you. I have not read the book. I have ordered it as we have spoken. So I'm really grateful for this conversation. So
That's great.
And for this congregation, this is just tremendous.
And thank you, Lori. Your words really touched me. And I actually do the audio narration for the audiobook, and I had to audition for that. So if you find my voice not too grating, that's another version for the car ride or the run or the walk. I'm going to skip the reading because I think that some of you have already read quite a bit of it, and I want to respect everyone's time. But what I want to say is, as a final words here, and if you're curious, if you have a copy of the book, the section I was going to read is in paternalism, pages 61 to 63. And there's a powerful story that my prayer is that we avoid for Easter's home. I'll leave that as a teaser. Last thing I'll say, two last things. One, feel free to be in touch, social media, email through John or Dot. Second, 1.5, thank you all. This has been incredible. I'm so moved by the work you're doing. It's so important. And the last thing I'll say, and part Lori kind of inspired me to reflect on this, in recognizing others' humanity, we reaffirm our own. In recognizing the humanity of others, even when it's hard, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. And at times we're going to fall short. Don't worry, you will. You will make, But in recognizing the humanity in others and in ourselves, to make mistakes, to fall short, we will reaffirm our humanity. And that to me is a blessing that we have from God and allows us to, come together as kind of the beloved community that I think we know we're capable of. So thank you all. Many blessings to you. And Mark, I think I have to say it.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you all very much. Kevin, thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Caldwell. You're
Thank-
awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, come on.